which is completely backwards. So yes, the Congress has become irrelevant. Thankfully, hopefully, it's a temporary situation. Hopefully we'll have a good constitutionalist as the next president of the United States. We'll give the power back to the Congress, as it should be.
Till then, or the cat's out of the gate.
I think the cat is out of the gate, and there's some benefits to it. One of the things that has emerged over the past few years has been a very quiet, but a very important strategic alliance with Israel and many of the Gulf states, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Kuwaitis, the United Arab Emirates. There's a very tacit understanding that because of what America has been doing, that they may need to rely on each other much more than ever in the past. That could be a game changer for a lot of things. Not to mention the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, because if we have buy-in from the broader Gulf nations, then I do see a path to a real peace deal. I don't see a path to a peace deal with the American administration, any American administration, or with the Europeans. I think you have buy-in from the Arabs, then you have a real chance at a negotiated, long-lasting peace. But in terms of the Iran deal, I will tell you that there are countries like Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, which borders Iran, another Muslim nation, who, if Israel needs to do, at the end of the day, what it will need to do in order to prevent nuclear Iran, it would not surprise me to see Israeli warplanes taking off from those air bases, being able to use their airspace. That's how far, and like I said, maybe in a positive way, Obama has pushed Israel and the Arab nations into this alliance, because they are terribly fearful of a nuclear Iran. So yes, Congress, I think, under this presidency is completely irrelevant. I think we've seen that, not just on this issue, but on a horde of other issues. And in terms of this particular situation, if the deal goes through, I do think until January 2017, it's going to be a very tenuous time. Very tenuous time.
If it goes down, let's say the deal goes down, from the U.S. perspective, what does that do with the rest of the world? Do they just ignore it?
I think the rest of the world might ignore it. I think they might ignore it. And I think they may have the sanctions on their own. They might.
Figuring that this guy's not going to do anything anyways.
Maybe. It's a very real possibility. Very real possibility. Yes, sir.
If I play devil's advocate for just
Always.
a second? Okay. First of all, Prime Minister Netanyahu, the first time he warned about an Iranian nuclear weapon was in 1992, when he said it would be happening within 3 to 5 years. And I understand that things can be set back, but, a quarter of a century, I don't know about that. Secondly, you said something about the Arab Spring being, the Iranians being behind the Arab Spring. I don't know of any Iranian connection between the civil war in Libya or what happened in Egypt and anything that went on in Iran. Maybe Saudi Arabia, but I don't know about Iran. Lastly, in September of 2013, President Obama called the president of Iran after 30 years of no talking between the two heads of state. That morning, the president of Iran had made an overdue payment to the World Bank and had pledged that they were going to bring their account up to date. That was the trigger mechanism that brought all that. Not anything had to do with nuclear weapons, but that afternoon they start talking about nuclear weapons. Since then, the IMF has made multiple trips over there. And since then also, the Iranian government has been inviting multinational oil companies to come in and partake in a new privatization of their oil fields and their oil industry. So my question to you is whether Obama is really a bad negotiator or whether he's maybe negotiating a completely different deal.
Different deal in what sense? An economic deal?
Possibly so.
So the first question, the estimates in terms of Iran's nuclear weapon capability. It's a very difficult thing to touch on because it deals with intelligence issues and the information the government had at the time. I wasn't involved in the Israeli government in 1992. So I cannot speak to whatever intelligence they were looking at that time. I just can't. I don't have that information. I did have security clearance in 1998 and 1999 when I was with the Prime Minister back then. And the intelligence estimates were very, very accurate, very, very real. The information came from very good sources. And I think if you look at where the world is today, that timeline in 1998, 1999 that was laid out to us by Israeli intelligence is coming to fruition, or else this immediate push or rush to get a deal wouldn't have happened. So, you know, whether they got it right or wrong in 1992, I can't tell you. I just don't know. Regarding, what was the second one?
Arab Spring.
Arab Spring. So what happened in the Arab Spring was, and you really have to, it really is a trail of money. But what happened in the Arab Spring was that a lot of these movements got started because there was a deep desire of people to change their economic situation. You had unemployment rates of 40, 50, 60% among young men in countries like Libya and Egypt. And in countries that are very male-dominated societies, when a man can't earn a living, it's really a sign of shame. And so a lot of these movements got started with good intentions by these young people looking to change their situation. But the Iranians and by the way, the Saudi Arabians, the Wahhabis as well, and it depends what country you're looking at, but mostly the Iranians, they saw an opportunity to help fund the fundamentalists. And so this money trail that helped the fundamentalists kind of wait in line as these democracy moves were taking over. You know, one of the problems that I had with the George Bush administration is when there was a decision to pull out of Gaza, Condoleezza Rice and George Bush insisted on having elections in Gaza. And the Israeli government said we can't have these elections in Gaza. And they said, no, we have to have democracy. And it was explained that the problem in having elections in Gaza at the time was that for 20 years, one organization was feeding and clothing and employing and giving shelter to the people, Hamas. And so when there was going to be an election, guess who they were going to vote for? The people that had been feeding them and clothing them, giving them shelter, Hamas. And we said there's no way to have what was really wanted in terms of Gaza, which was to have the moderate Palestinians govern Gaza and not allow Hamas to rise. But Secretary of State and the President seemed to insist on bringing democracy to Gaza. So if you fast forward what happened in the Arab Spring, it was a similar situation in the sense that the funding for a lot of these radical groups came from Iran. And as these democracy movements grew, they were transformed by the imams and the mullahs. Tahrir Square, by the way, the Google executive that was about to walk up on stage and claim victory in the Arab Spring in Tahrir Square, as he was walking Tahrir Square, got pulled away by the fundamentalists. And it was an imam that went up and gave the victory speech in Tahrir Square. And so what you saw was, you saw these guys waiting, lying in wait. And as the democracy movements kind of started to fade, the fundamentalists came in and took over, and they got elected. They just like Hamas got elected. They got elected because they had also been feeding and clothing and sheltering the people in the street. And so if you look at whether it's in Somalia, bless you, or whether it's in North Africa or in Egypt, Egypt, by the way, we had a real transformation. Remember, we had our president back Sisi in the Muslim Brotherhood after the Arab Spring. And we saw what happened with that. And in fact, we got lucky in Egypt because that didn't last too long. The Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, and because if you're wondering, the Muslim Brotherhood is not, because I always get this, that, well, you know, all this radical fundamentalism is a result of American colonialism in the Middle East. It's really not. If you look at where the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood started, it was back in the 19th century when Turkey and Egypt realized they were going to have to separate church and state. And there was a real movement to try and separate Islam from the governing of the nation. And groups like the Muslim Brotherhood were established way back then to assassinate the leaders of these countries that wanted to remove Islam from the state. Now they weren't, it was kind of like Israel, it was a Jewish state and a lot of the laws are governed by Judaism. But to have, instead of clerics, politicians running the country. In any case, so the Arab Spring turned into a way for these fundamentalist organizations to take over the countries and allow Iran a flow of money, a flow of weapons to whichever country they want now within these 6 or 7 nations. Finally, regarding President Obama, listen, I've been in a lot of countries where I've had to deal with the IMF and the World Bank. These groups do not, how do I say this? They really don't hold accountable the countries that they give money to with how the money is spent. They really don't. I have seen situations, in fact in Gaza, going back to Gaza, where the World Bank had given Yasser Arafat, I think it was about €1 billion to build a highway in Gaza. And they built the highway. And then in October of that year, the first rainy season came, and the rain came, guess what happened to the highway? It just washed away. Because out of the $1 billion, they maybe put $100 million into actually building, and $900 million got pocketed into the leadership of the Palestinian Authority. I don't know that opening the World Bank or opening the IMF into Iran has anything to do with good geoeconomic policy. These are organizations which have mostly European interests at heart. The French very much so. The French have a long history in Iran. And I think they're all looking for a way to make very good economic deals for their countries, but I don't see how it benefits the world globally. I certainly don't see how it benefits Israel or the United States. If you want to talk afterwards, we can get into more detail. Yes, sir.
One of the most disturbing aspects of this Iran deal that I heard about, and you didn't touch on, was my understanding is that we have a commitment to defend them against any attack against their infrastructure.
I don't know the details about that. I honestly don't know about that detail in terms of us having to defend their infrastructure. It may be that some of the other countries have to, in terms of the oil infrastructure, if there are oil deals in order to protect the flow of oil. It may be that kind of detail, but I don't know enough to comment on it, so I apologize.
Well, hopefully that doesn't mean that we would have to go against Israel if they decided to strike.
Yeah, I know. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think that something's happened at a very high level that we only know about decades afterwards. The Secretary of Defense Ash Carter was in Israel shortly after the deal was announced. And usually these visits are very high profile, a lot of media. There wasn't a lot of media. I mean, everyone knew he was there. But in terms of the meetings, they were very quiet meetings, very closed-door meetings, very one-on-one meetings. Usually the defense minister comes to a country and he meets with his counterpart, the other defense minister. But the meetings were with the prime minister. I do believe that there's still, at the military level, a very special relationship between Israel and the United States. And I've seen it over the years, regardless of presidents, prime ministers, there's been an enormous amount of cooperation. It wouldn't surprise me that if Ash Carter had come to tell Israel that they were going to be getting some of these bunker busting bombs that they really would need in case they'd ever have to attack Iran. I mean, I don't think America has any desire to do anything militarily at this point, but I don't think they mind someone else doing their dirty work for them. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it was kind of a carrot and stick situation. I do think that I know that there's no chance that America would put itself in conflict with Israel militarily in any region of the world, regardless of the deal. And I never saw any evidence that this deal does that. Yes, ma'am.
I wonder if you could share your thoughts on what can be done in lieu of the current proposed Iranian deal to slow down or to prevent the building of a nuclear weapon, and do you feel that sanctions alone are adequate?
No, I don't think sanctions alone are adequate. I think they help a lot. a whole lot, but they're not enough. It's always been a race against time, and the race has always been between regime change and nuclear development. Can we get the regime to change before they develop nuclear weapons? It hasn't happened yet. We had a chance, by the way, a few years ago, and this president turned his back on the people in Iran that wanted a regime change. At the time, there may have been a possibility of regime change. And so now this whole notion that we're going to bring about it by lifting of sanctions, with a little, so I think first you get the regime change, then you lift the sanctions, not the other way around. But having said that, I don't think sanctions in the long run are enough. If this regime remains this regime, in other words, if the Ayatollahs remain in power long enough, they will achieve a nuclear capability one way or another. Will it be in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years? I don't know. So the one option is continued sanctions and eventual regime change. The second option is continued sanctions and military strike. One of those two things have to happen. And again, it's a race against time. And I always say that you have to have really good intelligence to know when to strike. I always use the analogy of the movie The Bridge on the River Kwai, right? So, how many people have seen the movie? Enough gray hair here. Enough gray hair and bald hair there. So the movie The Bridge on the River Kwai, which takes place in Japan in World War II, these British soldiers are building a bridge for the Japanese military to have trained to be able to take weapons and men across this river Kwai. And I always say that it made no sense to blow up the bridge when they laid the first pylon, because you can rebuild that real quick. But when they're laying that last pylon, as the train's coming around the corner, or the last plank, just as the train's coming around the corner, not only do you blow up the bridge, but take the train with it. And so you get the most effective damage done. Israel kind of takes a similar point of view with regard to nuclear capability of Iran. Again, you may have a scientist disappear, a cell phone blow up in his hand, a stocknet virus, something happens that delays the process. But at the end of the day, you have to have very good intelligence and know exactly where they're laying that last plank. And if they are laying that last plank, that's when you blow up the bridge. Yes, sir.
I'm a retired United Methodist pastor. My wife and I have been to Israel twice together, and I went over once to go to basically a 2-week school in Jerusalem. And in that school, one of the most important things that I learned was that when I was to go home, that I should be selling the idea that our country should lock, stock, and barrel push Israel as our ally stronger than any other ally in the world. And this was coming from Jewish leaders, and me, a Methodist pastor. And when I came home from that somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s, I have been pushing Israel as our ally ever since, and I will continue. So I want to first of all thank you for bringing this message to us tonight. But I also want to tell you that when I look at Israel, I see people, like you were saying, how big is Israel compared with all these others? And they're still standing. And I feel it's absolutely necessary that we go against our evil president and push Israel as our ally and stand with them wherever they are. So I again wanted to thank you for coming here.
Thank you very much. Again, I will say that, politicians use the word ally in the sense of geopolitical relationships. And that's certainly true when it comes, to Israel and the United States. But as I said earlier, I do believe that this is, the same ideas and values that inspired our founding fathers are the ideas and values that come out of the Bible. The idea of freedom, of liberty, of self-determination. And that is an alliance that goes way deeper than any kind of convenient geopolitical alliance. And so that's why I think we as Americans, and Israelis as Israelis, and I'm lucky enough to be both, really have to understand that unique relationship. You know, Canada is an ally, France is an ally, Japan is an ally. Different kind of ally. The Israel-America relationship is the type of relationship, the type of alliance that represents what freedom and liberty mean. I will tell you, I did a campaign in Azerbaijan. I was working for the president of Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan is a Muslim country, and it has a border with Iran, but it is a very modern Muslim country. I mean, the women wear miniskirts, they eat pork and drink wine. I mean, you couldn't tell. I mean, there are mosques everywhere, but it's a moderate Muslim country. I actually, as a Jew, could go to a synagogue in Baku and practice, and it was absolutely fine, which I did, in fact. I had 3 translators, all women, all college educated, all in their mid to late 20s. And along the course of the campaign, each of the 3 of them asked me to have a private conversation with them, someplace out of sight. You know, usually when a 25-year-old woman tells you that, you gotta wonder. But the 3 women all had the same request. They all wanted student visas to come to the U.S. And I'd say, why? You live in a great country, you got a college education, you have a job. Why would you want to come to America? I mean, this is where your home is, your family is. And they all 3 said the same thing. When my dad decides I'm going to get married, I'm going to marry the man he wants. The man I marry is going to tell me whether or not I can continue to work or not work. Then, he's going to decide how many children I have. And we're probably going to live in his mom's house. Which is what they do. They build a floor over the parents' live. And it just struck me that, and this was 2 years ago. It just struck me that, and this is a country that has full-fledged democracy. Full-fledged democracy. People vote free and fair elections. Pretty free and fair. And yet, you have these 3 young women, college educated, all employed, and what do they want? They want to come to the land of liberty and freedom. How wonderful is that as an American to feel that constant pull to this country? I'm telling you, we are at the precipice, Pastor, that both Israel and America and Western civilization may very well fall over if we don't fight with all our heart, all our soul to defend that liberty and freedom.
We do have to be out here soon, so we've got maybe time for what, 3 more questions, 3 or 4 more here? I'm going to pass this. I was going to figure out a way to ask him, do you guys take money? I didn't know if I could segue.
It's not for me, by the way.
This is for us. It pays for like the banner, it pays for the advertising. We do the advertising we get people who've never heard of us to come. So what's best is around, if you have a nickel or a quarter or $1,000, that's what we say.
I don't know if you can talk about this or not, but what about the intelligence that is shared between the 2 countries, America and Israel, or even perhaps Saudi Arabia and Israel? Is that something that you can address or not?
Yeah, so the question is, what about the intelligence that's shared between American Israel and Saudi Arabia and Israel? The Saudi Arabia-Israel question is one that I really can't answer, and I probably should answer. But like I said earlier, there's a unique relationship growing between Israel and a lot of the Gulf states, and that would certainly include some level of intelligence sharing. With regard to America, the intelligence shared between Israel and America is at the highest levels, and I've seen things. I got a great story back in the first Gulf War. The president called the prime minister and said, listen, you know, we're going into Iraq, and I know you've got these units of trained dogs that smell out the IEDs. We don't have those units trained yet, because it's a war that we haven't fought before. Can we borrow the dogs? And the prime minister said, sure, just one problem. The dogs understand Hebrew. They don't understand English. So we're going to have to send our Israeli army handlers. So the Israeli handlers with these dogs, I mean, they were Israeli soldiers, but in American uniforms, went into Iraq with the American army. And one of the guys, he ended up becoming the leader of the unit, told me that and the way they communicate with these dogs, the dogs wear a little two-way receiver on their collar. And so you can talk, you know, from 500 yards, guys, just talking like this, and he's communicating with the dog. At one point, he's communicating with the dog, and 3 Iraqi guard soldiers come running out screaming in Arabic, "The Israelis are here, the Israelis are here!" And they surrender to the dog. Even at that level, there's an amazing amount of sharing. But even today, when it comes to terrorist networks, and, there's a unit in the Israeli military that's purely counterterrorism. And I can tell you that it's a unit I'm very closely affiliated with, that going back to my military service in Israel. I can tell you that they probably intercept, and I can't give you the numbers because it's classified, but they probably intercept at least once a day a terrorist on his way to carry out an act of terror in Israel. Every day. So you can imagine the level of intelligence that this unit requires. And that kind of intelligence is absolutely critical, also to keeping Americans safe, both domestically and abroad. So there's a lot of intelligence sharing going on, and it has never wavered, regardless of presidents and prime ministers.
What is Israel's relation with Turkey?
Contentious. Very contentious, but I would call it's almost like Soviet-American détente, if you will, at this point. It used to be that the Israelis actually had contracts to service all the Turkish Air Force airplanes. And just a few years ago that got canceled, partly because internally Turkey is also facing a very difficult struggle. The secular army leadership is really being forced out by the religious extremists. And it is a parliamentary system, and there's a real danger that, that the Islamists will take over in Turkey. And so domestically, they've kind of had to put a distance between themselves and the Israelis. But again, at a security level and an intelligence level, there's a lot of communication that still goes on, especially as it affects Kurdistan, the border with Syria, the border with Iraq, so on and so forth. And quite frankly, from a tourism standpoint, there's a lot of tourism back and forth. I think there are 3 direct flights daily between Tel Aviv and Istanbul. So, and Israelis go there for vacation, Turkish citizens come to Israel for vacation. So if that's any indication, I can't fly to Iran or Iraq from Israel, but I can fly to Turkey. Yes, sir.
I know it's the second one. Before Bill Copley left, he came in and he expressed that Representative Doug Collins voted against the Iran review bill to support Israel. First of all, I want to say that he did vote against it before he voted for it. The last vote passed by a record of 534 against 1 in both the House and the Senate. The one member who voted against it was Republican Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas. My question for you is that bill, I'd like to know your opinion of that bill, because when I read it, it sounds like to me that it's heads Obama wins and tails Congress loses.
Yeah.
And I would like to know what your opinion of that bill is.
Yeah, to some degree, I think you're right. I mean, the bill, the bill, legislators have a great way, as you said, of being able to vote for something before they vote against it, or vote against something before they vote for it. And even when they pass a bill, that they can say, well, I voted against it, the bill itself either does little or does the exact opposite of what we want. I think this Iran review bill is exactly that type of bill. The only thing that we need now is a clear 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate that say no to this deal. That's the only thing that matters at this point. All this other stuff is either just words with 535 signatures at the bottom of it and a presidential seal, or actually hurting the desired outcome. So, God bless Senator Khan. I think he's one of the strongest voices we have in Washington, D.C. at this point. He's been, when it comes to foreign policy, he's been exactly where we needed to be. I wish there were more like him. I think we have time to make 4 more.
Can I follow up on what you just said, though?
Yes.
What was Corker duped, or did he know what he was doing? Because surely any right person would figure out that Obama's going to be able to get 34 senators to stand with him to override the veto. That's the whole thing. It's already baked in the cake.
Right.
We're just being played with now.
I agree. For the most part, I agree. I can't tell you, the Senate especially is such a inside, I mean, even the fact that Ted Cruz, I mean, you gotta wonder what happened there. And I don't know the answer to that. I just don't know the answer. I don't know what trade-off, what leadership promise, I can't tell you. But a lot of the times it's, a promise of leadership to do something else on the same issue to completely, debunk whatever just got, but I can't tell. I don't know enough about what happened internally to allow those other, perceived to be very strong senators on the issue to vote that way. I just don't know. Yes, sir. I think last question.
This may or may not be relevant. What effect does oil production in the United States have to do with, I know that, I think everybody knows that oil was a big funder of terrorism around the world. Oil production in the United States, I know Obama said against that before.
Right.
How big a deal is that?
The problem,
cutting into that.
Yeah, the problem is the United States, the problem is China, right? So even if we were completely self-reliant in terms of oil production, which we could be, if we had a president just let us drill, and totally not have to import foreign oil, even if we were able to become completely independent from Gulf oil, the Chinese have such a demand that OPEC wouldn't have to reduce their production quantity at all, and the flow of income to the Arab nations would be as high, if not higher. From a point of view of economic stability, even geopolitical, negotiating point of view, being completely independent from foreign oil is a very good place for the United States to be. But in terms of cutting off revenue to the Gulf states, it won't happen because the demand of China is so much larger than anything we can imagine.
All right. Thank you. Around for a little while. I know he's got a family to get back to and a very busy schedule, and I really appreciate you coming out. I'm also amazed every time we have one of our meetings at the questions we get. It's not like, did you like pizza better than whatever? I mean, these are serious, substantive questions, so it's a joy. We learn it. Somebody asked about website. We do have a website. We do have a Facebook page. Website is utpog.com, United Tea Party of Georgia.com. You can also get there by going to teaparty.ga. That's just a redirection there. We do have a Facebook page. I'm not sure what the actual Facebook page thing is, and unfortunately I don't think I've put a link on the front page there. So if you go to Facebook and type United Tea Party of Georgia, we'll certainly find it. We appreciate any comments or anything you want to leave, any questions.
When will the film be on, and where will it be?
Well, I guess we'll try to put it up on the website. I think we may make a YouTube channel and put it there because that's easy for them to host, and then link to it there. I got stuff to do, but hopefully in the next couple of days I'll get it done. If you really want it, send me an email, and that'll prompt me to get it done. And when I get it done, we don't know how the audio is going to be. It's the best we can do without being in the way there. This is my son, by the way, Michael.
Hey.
I'll be around to you if you have any questions. It would help greatly if you could pick up a chair and somebody will be showing you how to put it in the rack back there. That makes it a whole lot faster.